This is Avery Reece, and I'm going to be reading Chapter 2 of My Side of the Mountain, in which I get started on this venture. I left New York in May. I had a penknife, a ball of cord, an axe, and $40, which I had saved from selling magazine subscriptions. I also had some flint and steel, which I had bought at a Chinese store in the city. The man in the store had showed me how to use it. He had also given me a little purse to put it in, and some tinder to catch the sparks. He had told me that if I ran out of tinder, I should burn cloth and use the charred ashes. I thanked him and said, "This is the kind of thing I am not going to forget." On the train north to the Catskills, I unwrapped my flint and steel and practiced hitting them together to make sparks. On the wrapping paper, I made these notes. A hard brisk strike is best. Remember to hold the steel in the left hand and the flint in the right, and hit the steel with the flint. The trouble is the sparks go every which way, and that was the trouble. I did not get a fire going that night, and as I mentioned, this was a scary experience. I hitched rides into the Catskill Mountains at about 4 o'clock. A truck driver and I passed through a beautiful dark hemlock forest, and I said to him, "This is as far as I'm going." He looked all around and said, "You live here?" "No," I said, "but I am running away from home, and this is just the kind of forest I have always dreamed I would run to. I think I'll camp here tonight." I hopped out of the cab. "Hey boy," the driver shouted. "Are you serious?" "Sure," I said. "Well now, ain't that something? You know, when I was your age, I did the same thing. Only thing was, I was a farm boy and ran to the city, and you're a city boy running into the woods." I was scared of the city. "Do you think you'll be scared of the woods?" "Heck no," I shouted loudly, as I marched into the cool, shadowy woods. I heard the driver call to me, "I'll be back in the morning if you want to ride home." He laughed. Everybody laughed at me, even Dad. I told Dad that I was going to run away to great-grandfather Gribley's land. He had roared with laughter and told me about the time he had run away from home. He got on a boat, headed for Singapore. But when the whistle blew for departure, he was down the gangplank and home in bed before anyone knew he was gone. Then he told me, "Sure, go try it. Every boy should try it." I must have walked a mile into the woods until I found a stream. It was clear, athletic stream that rushed and ran and jumped and splashed. Ferns grow along its banks, and its rocks were upholstered with moss. I sat down, smelled the piney air, and took out my penknife. I cut off a green twig and began to whittle. I have always been good at whittling. I carved a ship once that my teacher exhibited for Parents' Night at school. First I whittled an angle on one end of the twig. Then I cut a smaller twig and sharpened it to a point. I whittled at an angle on that twig and bound the two angles face to face with a strip of green bark. It was supposed to be a fishhook, according to a book on how to survive on the land that I read in the New York Public Library. This was the way to make your own hooks. I then dug for worms. I had hardly chopped the moss away with my axe before it hit frost. It had not occurred to me that there would be frost in the ground in May, but then I had not been on a mountain before. This did worry me before I was depending on fish to keep me alive, until I got to my great-grandfather's mountain, where I was going to make traps and catch game. I looked into the stream to see what else I could eat, and as I did, my hand knocked a rotten log apart. I remembered about old logs and all the sleeping stages of insects that are in it. I chopped away until I found a cold white grub. I swiftly tied a string to my hook, put the grub on, and walked up the stream looking for a good place to fish. All the manuals I had read were very emphatic about where fish lived, and so I had memorized this. In streams, fish usually congregate in pools and deep calm waters. The heads of rifles, small rapids, the tail of a bull, eddies below rocks or logs, deep undercut banks, in the shade of overhanging bushes, all are very likely places to fish. This stream did not seem to have any calm water, and I must have walked 1,000 miles before I found a pool by a deep undercut bank and the shade of overhanging bushes. Actually, it wasn't that far. It just seemed that way, because as I went looking and finding nothing, I was sure I was going to starve to death. I squatted on this bank and dropped in my line. I did so want to catch a fish. One fish would set me upon my way, because I had read how much you can learn from one fish. By examining the contents of its stomach, you can find what the other fish are eating, or you can use the internal organs as bait. The grub went down to the bottom of the stream. It swirled around and hung still. Suddenly the string came to life and rode back and forth and around in a circle. I pulled with a powerful jerk. The hook came apart, and whatever I had went circling back to its bed. Well, that almost made me cry. My bait was gone, my hook was broken, and I was getting cold, frightened, and mad. I whittled another hook, but this time I cheated and used string to wind it together instead of bark. I walked back to the log and luckily found another grub. I hurried to the pool and I flipped the trout out of the water. Before I knew it, I had a bite. The fish flopped, and I threw my whole body over it. I could not bear to think of it flopping itself back into the stream. I cleaned it like I had seen the man at the fish market do, examined its stomach, and found it empty. This horrified me. What I didn't know was that an empty stomach means the fish are hungry and will eat about anything. However, I thought at the time that I was a goner. Sadly, I put some of the internal organs on my hook, and before I could get my line to the bottom, I had another bite. I lost that one, but got the next one. I stopped when I had 5 nice little trout, and looked around for a place to build a camp and make a fire. It wasn't hard to find a pretty spot along that stream. I selected a place beside a mossy rock in a circle of hemlocks. I decided to make a bed before I cooked. I cut off some boughs for a mattress. Then I leaned some dead limbs against the boulder and covered them with hemlock limbs. This made a kind of tent. I crawled in, lay down, and felt alone and secret and very excited. But the rest of the story, I was on the northeast side of the mountain. It grew dark and cold early. Seeing the shadows slide down on me, I frantically ran around, gathering firewood. This is about the only thing I did right from that moment until dawn, because I remembered that the driest wood in a forest is the dead limbs that are still on the trees, and I gathered an enormous pile of them. That my must still be there, for I never got a fire going.